Okay, let's get into it. Today, we're diving deep into something, well, pretty specific. The global market for passenger vehicle diesel engine exhaust valves.
Uh-huh. Sounds niche, I know. But you'd be surprised what zooming in on a single component like this can tell you about bigger automotive trends.
Absolutely. And we're basing this deep dive on a pretty detailed market analysis. It's got data going back to 2021, projections for 2025, and forecasts stretching all the way out to 2033.
Right. So our goal here is to really unpack those numbers, look at how things are shaping up in different parts of the world, and sort of figure out what this very specific market signals about, diesel passenger cars more broadly.
So why exhaust valves? Why this level of detail?
Because sometimes, looking at the small parts reveals these fascinating patterns about where whole industries might be heading. It's about seeing the gears turning.
Let's see what these numbers tell us then. Where do we start? The big picture.
Yeah, let's start globally. What's striking right away, actually, is that despite everything you hear about diesel declining, this analysis shows continued growth for this specific component.
Okay, so what was the value back in 2021?
$2,301 million. So 301.63 million to be exact.
And the projection for next year, 2025.
That climbs to about $787 million. A decent jump.
And looking way out to 2033.
The forecast hits $486.4 million. So yeah, quite a significant increase over the decade.
That translates to what, a compound annual growth rate, a CGR.
Exactly. The report pegs the global CAGR at 4.9% through 2033. Steady, significant growth overall.
12.9% globally.
Okay.
But that average must hide some big regional differences, right? Where's that growth actually coming from?
That's the crucial question. And yeah, the analysis breaks it down and the picture varies a lot. Asia Pacific, that's the real engine here,
The biggest market already back in 2021.
by far. Over $812 million then. And the forecast, it pushes past $1.5 billion by 2033.
Wow, so that must be the highest regional growth rate too.
It is. The KGR for APAC is pegged at 5.551%, clearly the leader in terms of momentum.
And within Asia Pacific, China and India usually dominate these stories.
They do here too. China started around 305 million in 2021 and is forecast to more than nearly double to over 617 million by 2033. That's a CAGR of 6.118%. Really strong.
India.
Very similar story. From about 139 million up to over 281 million, CAGR there is 6.062%. So yeah, those two alone are massive drivers.
Okay, but what about other places in APAC? Japan, Korea.
Yeah, the report details them. Japan's growing at just over 5% CAGR. South Korea and Australia are more in the 4 to 4.5% range. Singapore's a bit over 4%.
Southeast Asia, Taiwan.
Also showing solid growth, both above 4.8%, so it seems pretty strong across most of the major players there.
But not everywhere.
Well, interestingly, the report notes the rest of APAC's category. That actually has the slowest CAGR in the region, only about 1.367%, so the growth is really concentrated.
Okay, good detail. Let's shift gears. North America. How does it stack up?
North America is positioned as like a very steady, substantial market, second largest by value.
Starting value.
Over 683 million in 2021, and it's projected to hit over 1.1 billion by 2033.
And the growth rate.
The regional CAGR is 4.483%. Solid. Pretty close to the global average, actually.
Within North America, I assume the U.S. is the biggest piece.
Oh, yeah. The U.S. goes from roughly 534 million to 877 million by 2033. CAGR of 4.399%.
But wait, you said the regional average was a bit higher? 4.483%.
Right, because Canada and Mexico actually show slightly faster growth rates within the region. Canada's at 4.9%, nearly 5%, and Mexico is at 4.6%.
Huh, so the numbers are growing a bit quicker percentage-wise, even if the U.S. market is bigger overall.
Interesting. Okay, Europe.
Europe is the third largest, started at over 540 million in 21, forecast to pass 923 million by 2033.
Growth rate there.
Regional CAGR is 4.727%. So again, similar to North America, a steady performer compared to the global picture.
Any standout countries in Europe? Yeah, some interesting variations. Germany actually shows the strongest growth in Europe, 5.139% CAGR. The UK is close behind, just under 5%.
And the others? France, Italy.
That's where it differs. France is quite a bit slower, 3.719%. And Italy, it has the lowest TEGR in Europe in this analysis, only 3.281%.
That really highlights different trajectories for diesel within Europe, doesn't it?
It certainly suggests that. The report also gives numbers for Russia, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Luxembourg, mostly in the 3.5 to 4.9% range.
And the rest of Europe. Any surprises there?
Actually, yes. Just like in APAC, the rest of Europe category has a surprisingly high CAGR within the region, 5.405%, higher than Germany's.
Another case of hitting growth pockets. Okay,
Okay.
what about South America? Smaller market, I imagine,
Smaller in absolute value, yes. Just over 96 million in 2021, but
but strong growth.
very strong growth projected. It's expected to more than double, reaching over 228 million by 2033.
So a high CGR then.
The second highest regional CGR, actually, 5.137%. Definitely a region showing a lot of potential in this specific market.
Who's leading the charge there? Brazil.
Brazil, yeah, leading with a 5.337% CAGR, and Colombia is right behind it, 5.315%. Others, like Argentina, Peru, Chile, are also showing solid growth, over 4.3%.
Okay, 2 regions left.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Also showing solid growth, over 4.3%.
Okay, 2 regions left. The Middle East.
The Middle East market, valued around 101 million in 2021, forecast to hit 155 million by 2033.
Growth rate.
A bit more modest. Regional CAGR is 3.292%.
Any specific country details?
Yeah, it notes Saudi Arabia is slower, around 2.8%, Turkey is about 3.1%, UAE 3.58%, Egypt and Qatar also around that 3.4, 3.5% mark.
Seems fairly consistent then, but slower than other regions.
Mostly. But then you get this really fascinating detail, the rest of the Middle East category.
Another rested category. What's the story here?
It starts tiny, just $5.5 million in 2021, projected to grow to over 9.4 million, but the CAGR,
Let me guess. It's I.
it's 6.389%.
6.4% almost. That's higher than China.
It's the highest percentage growth rate mentioned anywhere in the entire analysis.
Wow. Okay, from a very small base, but still.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. What could be driving that?
The report doesn't specify, but it shows how granular data can uncover these, unexpected hotspots. Specific local factors must be at play.
Incredible detail.
Yeah.
Okay, last region, Africa. Smallest market.
Smallest in 2021 value, yeah, just under 67 million. But it's also projected for decent growth over 118 million by 2033.
And the CAGR.
It's 4.029%. So, rising. Nigeria is mentioned at over 4.2%. South Africa a bit lower at 3.866%. And the rest of Africa just over 4%. Another contributor to the global picture.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together. We look very closely at one component, diesel exhaust valves. Globally, the market's growing steadily through 2033, a 4.9% CGR overall.
Right. But that global number really masks what's happening underneath. You've got Asia Pacific, led by China and India, just booming. That's the main growth engine.
And South America also showing really strong percentage growth, second fastest region overall.
Exactly. Then you have North America and Europe, still huge markets in terms of value, providing that steady baseline, but growing more moderately, closer to the global average. Though, as we saw, with variations within Europe.
And finally, the smaller rising markets, Africa growing healthily, and the Middle East growing a bit slower overall, but with that amazing high growth pocket in the rest of the Middle East.
So this isn't just academic. This data gives you a real tangible insight into where diesel passenger vehicles are likely still being made, sold, and importantly, used over the next decade.
It points to maybe different speeds of EV adoption, different economic situations affecting what cars people buy, maybe even different regulations region by region.
Precisely. It shows you the complexity on the ground captured by the demand for just one part. Understanding this level of detail can give you a really unique perspective on global manufacturing, supply chains, and how this massive transition in the auto industry isn't happening uniformly everywhere.
So we've seen the projections. Significant growth overall for these diesel exhaust valves through 2033, but with really distinct regional stories playing out.
Yeah, it's clear that while the narrative in some places is all about phasing out diesel passenger cars, the demand for these components and the vehicles they go into is forecast to stay strong, even accelerate, in other major parts of the world.
Which leads to a really interesting final thought for you to consider. We see this data projecting continued, even strong, demand for diesel components in Asia-Pacific and South America right through 2033. This seems to run counter to trends or policy pushes in maybe, say, parts of Europe. So what underlying factors, maybe fundamental differences in transportation needs or affordability, or perhaps the pace of regulatory change might explain why diesel passenger vehicles seem set to persist so strongly in these specific regions over the next decade, even as other areas move away faster? What does that imply about the global energy transition in transport?
Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take source material that you've shared and, well, we really break it down for you.
We dig in to find the core insights.
Exactly. And today, we're tackling something that might sound pretty specific. The global market dynamics for passenger vehicle diesel engine exhaust valves.
Right, sounds niche.
It does, but our source, Diesel Exhaust Valve Market Dynamics, shows it's actually, a window into some huge global shifts. Technology, environment, economics, it's all reflected here.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, think about it. It's just one component, a valve.
Yeah.
But it's market. It's right in the crosshairs of some major forces.
Like what specifically?
Well, you've got environmental regulations pushing one way, economic development pulling another way in different regions, and then there's the massive shift towards electric vehicles.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack all that using the source to show how these forces are shaping this valves market right now and, well, where it might be headed.
Precisely. Let's pull back the curtain.
All right, let's start with the positives then. What does the source say is actually driving growth for these exhaust valves? It seems there is still growth happening.
Oh, definitely. And a key driver is the demand in emerging markets. The source really highlights this.
Places like Asia, Latin America, Africa.
Exactly, those places. See, in these regions, diesel isn't really being phased out like it is elsewhere. It's still a very practical technology for many people.
And the source gets into the why, right? Something about torque and efficiency.
Yeah, superior torque, better fuel efficiency. Think about it. Maybe longer travel distances are common or vehicles are used for heavier tasks. Diesel just makes sense practically.
So as vehicle ownership grows in those economies, the basic need for diesel engine parts, like these valves, just increases naturally, both for new cars and maintenance.
That's a big part of it. But it's not just about more cars. There's also this increasing focus, globally really, on engine performance and pollution control.
So even where diesel is popular, the rules are getting stricter?
Yes, exactly. Emission standards are tightening up almost everywhere. It's becoming a global thing.
And that's where it gets interesting for the valves themselves, I guess.
Right, because this pressure, it forces the automakers, the OEMs, and also the companies making replacement parts, the aftermarket guys, to invest. They need more advanced exhaust valve tech.
What makes them advanced?
Well, we're talking about valves designed to handle really extreme heat, a lot of stress. They have to function perfectly for modern emission control systems to even work. So it's not just more valves, it's demand for better, more robust valves.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned the aftermarket. How does that fit in?
Well, the source points specifically to places like India and parts of Latin America. You've got large numbers of older diesel vehicles still on the road there, an aging fleet.
So lots of repair and replacement needs.
Exactly. People need replacement parts. But now, with these evolving emission rules, they often need parts that help the older vehicles stay compliant. It's not just about making it run, it's about making it run cleaner.
So that creates this steady demand for durable but also cost-effective replacements, a whole separate market force.
A huge one, yeah. Distinct from just selling new cars. So you've got this kind of positive momentum, right? Practical needs in emerging markets, tougher regulations demanding better tech, and a big aftermarket.
Okay, that paints a pretty positive picture in some ways.
It does. But now let's look at the other side of the coin. That momentum is running up against some pretty strong headwinds.
Right. The source mentioned challenges too, like the decline in diesel sales in more developed regions.
Exactly. Think North America and Europe. Environmental rules there are really cracking down on nitrogen.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Environmental rules there are really cracking down on nitrogen oxides and particulate emissions, big air quality concerns. Yeah.
Especially in cities. Yeah, I remember reading about that.
So those regulations are actively pushing consumers and manufacturers away from diesel.
Towards gasoline engines? Or
Toward gasoline, yes, but increasingly towards electric vehicles.
EVs.
EVs.
And that's a fundamental problem for an exhaust valve market, isn't it?
It really is. For a component like this, that trend in big established markets like Europe and North America, it means the potential customer base is, shrinking over the long term.
Which leads us straight to EVs.
Yep. The growing adoption of electric vehicles globally. EVs just don't have internal combustion engines. No engine, no exhaust, no need for exhaust valves. Simple as that.
And governments are pushing this transition pretty hard.
They are. You see subsidies for EV buyers, Investment in charging stations, ambitious carbon reduction targets, it all speeds up the shift. This isn't just some minor trend. It's potentially an existential threat to the market for any diesel-specific part, including valves.
Okay, so market decline in some regions, EVs taking over. What else? The source mentioned cost, I think, that these valves aren't cheap to make.
Not at all. That's a major constraint. Think about the conditions inside an engine. These valves face incredible heat and mechanical stress.
Right, they have to survive combustion, basically.
Constantly. So to do that reliably, the source says they need really high-grade materials. It mentions things like Inconel or specific titanium alloys.
Okay, those sound expensive.
They definitely are premium materials. And using them drives up the manufacturing costs significantly.
So manufacturers are squeezed.
Kinda, yeah. They need these expensive, high-performance materials to meet the durability and emission requirements. But at the same time, they face price pressure, especially competing against, say, lower-cost aftermarket options, or just dealing with that shrinking market in developed countries. It's a tough balancing act.
How do you make something that has to be high-cost work in a market with so many pressures?
That's the core challenge they face.
Okay, so, wow, we've got this real push and pull dynamic. Growth in some areas driven by need and regulation, but decline in EV disruption in others, plus high costs. So what's next for the valve itself? Is technology changing the actual component?
Absolutely. And the innovation is, in many ways, a direct response to these pressures, especially the need for durability and performance under harsh conditions. The source highlights the move towards lightweight, high-temperature alloys.
So not just the traditional steel anymore.
Right. They're using materials like titanium alloys, nickel-based alloys. It's about better heat resistance, which is critical for emission systems, but also potentially reducing weight. Less weight helps with performance and fuel efficiency overall.
Okay. And we're also seeing more turbocharged diesel engines, aren't we? Especially in SUVs and maybe mid-size cars.
Yes, that's a big trend. And turbocharging puts even more stress on the engine components. Higher pressures, higher temperatures compared to older engines.
So the exhaust valve has to be even tougher.
Much more robust, yeah. Use better materials, maybe different designs. The popularity of turbocharging itself is a specific factor driving innovation in valve technology. Metallurgy, design, it all has to keep up.
And what about coatings? The source mentioned surface treatments?
Yeah, things like nitriding or applying chromium nitride coatings. These aren't just minor tweaks. They significantly boost the valve's durability, its resistance to wear and tear, especially at high temperatures.
So they help the valves survive in those tough turbocharged environments, make them last longer.
Exactly. And that improved resilience helps meet those strict emission standards over the long haul. It can also mean longer service intervals, which is a plus for owners, especially in the aftermarket where reliability is king.
So these advancements are making the valves more sophisticated, higher value components in a way.
Precisely. Even as the overall market faces these huge shifts, the technology within the valve itself is getting more advanced to cope. So if you step back and look at the whole picture, this market for diesel exhaust valves, it's like a mini version of what's happening in the entire auto industry.
A microcosm.
Yeah, exactly. You see these conflicting forces. Strong demand in some regions driven by economics and local rules.
Clashing with environmental policies and the rise of EVs causing decline elsewhere.
Right. And stuck right in the middle is the component itself, this valve, constantly being improved with new materials and coatings just to meet performance needs and regulations.
So understanding this one part, this valve, actually tells you a lot about bigger things. Global economics, environmental shifts, consumer choices, where automotive tech is heading.
Absolutely. It connects to all of those broader trends.
Well, this has been really insightful. We've really unpacked how these global forces are playing out in this specific component market. Growth here, threats there, and innovation trying to keep pace.
It's a complex situation.
Definitely.
Right.
So based on everything we've discussed from the source, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. We see this clear tension, right? Strong, practical demand in emerging markets versus the definite shift away from diesel in developed ones, plus the huge shadow of EVs. So how much will these ongoing technological advancements in the valve itself, the better materials, the coatings, actually change the outcome? Can innovation make these valves relevant for longer than we might expect? Or is the bigger trend, the move away from combustion engines altogether, just too powerful in the long run?
It's the key question, isn't it? How long can innovation fight the tide?
Something to think about. Thank you again for sharing your source material with us for this deep dive. We really appreciate you letting us dig into it.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.